Welcome to our quarterly questions and answers on the Institute and the Thesis on Roman Catholic Media. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us, as always, is the Superior of the Institute, His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
Well, we have a super chat right away from Jimmy Hun for £100. Hello, Jimmy, and thank you. Did the Institute ever compose a response to Father Le Taranta's article attacking the thesis? When did the totalist clergy begin regarding the thesis as a theological error, rather than an opinion they didn't share? Father Cicada clearly considered it legitimate.
Well, could we take those one by one?
Sure.
The first one is that Frankie Logue, British citizen and very intelligent young man, he answered Father Le Taranta, and he did a perfect job. I don't think I could have done any better than what he did. So yes, we did in that sense. What's the second question?
When did the totalist clergy begin regarding the thesis as a theological error rather than an opinion they didn't share?
That came after the death of Father Cicada. We never really, we might have had discussions over the years. Father Cicada would come down once a month to the seminary in Florida, and once in a while we would have discussions about it. But nothing was bitter or in any way cantankerous. It was just, well, this is what we think, and that's what they think. So the after Father Cicada died, Bishop Dolan became very hostile to the thesis. And he said the Novus Ordo is an octopus and the thesis is one of its tentacles. He saw it as a compromise with the Novus Ordo and something that would lead people back to the Novus Ordo. See, so he declared war on it effectively. So that was something new. That was in 2020, 2021.
Well, because it's still, I think, in Father Cicada's pamphlet on traditionalists, infallibility, and the Pope, he lists the thesis as one of the possibilities.
Yes, Father Cicada was, I think he was a moderating influence on Bishop Dolan. I think so. Bishop Dolan tended to be a firebrand. I knew him for many, many years, since 1973, since January of 73. So many years, over 50 years I knew him. So he tended to be a firebrand, and he also was not very, how would you say, astute theologically. His main emphasis was always devotion, lives of the saints, and he knew those things perfectly. I was amazed how he could recount events in the lives of the saints just off the top of his head.
Or if there was, let's say, a fourth Wednesday's devotion, he would know.
Yes,
he would know of two of them.
Yes,
yes. That sort of thing.
But he, and I think he disliked philosophy and theology. I think he had a sort of reticence for it. He once said about our seminary, there are too many books. See, and we don't need so many books. He actually, toward the end of his life, he favored the idea of ordaining priests without the proper training, something that Father Cicada had condemned in an article not long before, a few years before. But he had this idea now that...
Is that untrained and untridentine, maybe?
Yes, that's Father Cicada's article. And so he had this idea that there's such a need for priests that we can just train them in a peremptory manner and send them out. And that's certainly not our attitude at all.
You've reflected that maybe that there's a school of thought that might have some validity there, but that's not your thinking. That you want to go the opposite way. You want more training.
Yes, I think that priests need more training than they ever needed. It used to be among diocesan clergy, in normal times, they would give you an adequate course in all of the things that you needed to know in theology and philosophy, but they did not give you a deep training. It was adequate. It was good, but they emphasized the pastoral a great deal. But they were well trained. I mean, I talked to priests who were trained in the old way, and they did all of their studies correctly. You would typically enter in as a 14-year-old in the minor seminary, and you would do 4 years of high school, and there you would do 4 years of Latin, and you would be reading Virgil, by Latin poetry, by the end of the 4th year. And then you would do in the minor seminary 2 years of philosophy, and then you would do 4 years of theology in the theologate. So that was a long trip, you might say, and that was for the diocesan priest. Now the Dominicans and the Jesuits, they emphasized much more studies. I mean, they were the vanguard of the church's thinking and theology, and so. But today, these young men have to defend themselves against every single attack, both from as St. Paul says, from the enemies of the church and from false brethren, and there is a sense other traditionalists attacking our positions, and they have to be able to respond to those things. That never existed before the council. I mean, everything was very calm before the council, but so they need a lot more training than before.
I do want to comment on your note about Bishop Dolan's deferring from theological questions, because some people might think, oh, His Excellency's being very insulting. I remember asking Bishop Dolan about theological questions, and he said to me, that's a Bishop Sanborn question. That's not my department. Father Cicada, your collaboration allowed you all to specialize. Mm-hmm. So Father Cicada could work on canon law and liturgy. Mm-hmm. Bishop Dolan was in, as you say, the devotions and pastoral department. Mm-hmm. You were in the condemnations department, I think.
Yes. We said it was like a department store, and that's behind the counter of devotions. You'd have Bishop Dolan, and liturgy you would have Father Cicada. And then in condemnations, you would have me behind the counter.
With your smiling face.
And with my smiling, what do you want condemned? Would you like something condemned? It was kind of funny. No, it was, when it was functioning nicely, it was sort of a nice trio. And I have nothing against Bishop Dolan. It's just, I knew him, and he was not a person that was, what do you call, astute theologically. I mean, his main thrust, you might say, was devotion and lives of the saints, and he was very, very good in those things. And
you're saying that's no fault. There are some very good clergy that are not necessarily great theologians.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And if everyone were theologians and people who are, let's say, given to theology, they tend to be abstract, and they are not very good pastors of the faithful. They belong in seminaries and universities and things like that. They don't belong with the faithful, So, and he was a great organizer of parishes, and he went a great missionary. He went all over. He said one Christmas, he said 5 masses in 5 different places on one Christmas.
On Christmas
Day.
You
can start at midnight, So
wow.
Yeah, he flew around. He was, and he got us out in the missions. He would push us to go out and say Mass in various places. I used to say Mass all through this eastern Pennsylvania. When at his bidding, he would set up these missions, and I would go out and do them. Bethlehem and Harrodsburg and various other places. And so. No, it's not in any way to detract from Bishop Dolan.
Different priests have different gifts.
Yes.
Not every priest is meant to be a seminary professor.
Right.
Not every priest is meant to be out in the parishes.
Right. There's a lot of diversity, as they say.
Andrew McFarland, $100. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew just says thank you for these live streams. Well, thank you for your contribution and support, Andrew. If you do have a question you want to pop in the chat, please feel free to do so. Brian Rott, $20. How does the lack of formal succession not compromise the church's indefectibility and visibility? Cardinal Mazzarella, etc., argue both material and formal succession are needed for apostolic authority.
Yes, well, you're saying material succession, that was usually referring to the succession of Greek schismatics, and some would say even the Anglican bishops. And they succeeded simply by assuring that somebody would come after the person that died in that same lineage. But they lack jurisdiction, and that's what all of the authors called material succession, all of the Catholic authors. We're in a unique situation because here we have legitimate material succession. You see, they had illegitimate material succession. They merely succeeded one to the other the way, a sheriff would succeed one to the other in a county or something like that. It had no connection with Rome. See, no connection with the church. These are people, these cardinals are people that have never been excluded from the Catholic Church juridically, and therefore are able to receive by supply jurisdiction the ability to elect a pope. And why so? Because the church needs them. The church absolutely needs electors. If the church does not have valid electors of a pope, the church dies. And that's what those same authors say. Right? But they never even conceived of a situation like this, so they never thought of material succession that was legitimate, that was legal. See, they never even conceived of it. That's what we have now is legitimate or legal material succession, but they don't have authority. However, they have a title to receive the authority to temporarily to elect a pope. Just as a defrocked priest, if assuming he's validly ordained, he is completely stripped of all of his duties and his priestly state, he remains a valid priest. The church, by canon law, gives him the power to absolve someone and give sacraments to someone who is dying, a Catholic who is dying. Why? Because that Catholic needs that priest at that time. And so the church grants him, by law, the ability to forgive sins at that point.
You're speaking about a defrocked Catholic, but even, let's say, a non-defrocked schismatic would be able to...
A schismatic can hear someone's confession, yes, because the Catholic needs that. You see, the Catholic has title to that, and so the church empowers that priest to do that. And that's the same thing, the same kind of principle here is that the church empowers these cardinals, however horrible they are, to elect a pope because the church absolutely needs that. It's analogy.
Father Disposito commented as well, today we have apostolicity even formally. Authority in act is not required for apostolicity to be formal. Would you add anything to that, Your Excellency?
Well, I would just say that the authors don't speak that way. In other words, when they say formal apostolicity, they're talking about bishops and popes with power. I'd just say that's a little dangerous to speak that way because the authors don't speak that way.
All right. Anthony Murphy for $20. Thank you, Anthony. Is there a difference in unicum masses of preconciliar and postconciliar antipopes? Antipope but not heretic versus antipope and heretic? Any spiritual benefit or grace? How do they differ if they do?
Could you say that one again, please?
Sure. Is there a difference in unicum masses of preconciliar and postconciliar antipopes? Antipope but not heretic versus antipope and heretic? Is there any spiritual benefit or grace to these masses? How do they differ?
If you're an antipope, you're a false pope. Antipope means that you are pretending to be a pope when there is a sitting pope, a true sitting pope. That's an antipope. So these Vatican II popes, in quotation marks, are not antipopes. See, there's no true pope sitting. See, so the so the question, I can't answer the question because there are no antipopes.
I think maybe at base is the question as any spiritual benefit or grace to unicum masses with antipopes.
Well, in other words, where if you are saying the mass in union with a false pope by whatever title, he's false. If he's a false pope, that is not a Catholic mass. For mass to be Catholic, it must be in union with the Catholic hierarchy, and he is the head of the Catholic hierarchy. It must be approved by the local bishop who is in communion with the Roman pontiff. That is a Catholic Mass. So if you are not in communion with the true Roman Pontiff, and a sign of that would be to mention the name of a false pope in the canon, that Mass is not Catholic. Now, St. Thomas says, and that this is not the teaching of the church, it's just St. Thomas, that Masses offered outside of the church do not give grace.
What was your quote about St. Jerome in reference to schismatic?
That God holds his nose for the stench that rises from a schismatic Mass. See,
that's quite an image.
Yes. Now, again, this is a unique situation because you have a false pope on the title of the fact that he is imposing heresy, but he is not false from the point of view of election. See, so that is unique. Both St. Thomas and St. Jerome were talking about just purely and 100% false in both respects. But in this case, you have a unique situation. So, but it doesn't change the fact that it is something you're objectively, I'm saying objectively, placing that Mass outside of the church if it is not in communion with the Catholic hierarchy.
Hopefully, Anthony, that answers your question. If you need a follow-up, please just put it in the chat. Teodoro Boggio, $2. Thank you, Teodoro. On the thesis side, are there missing chapters? It is a work in progress. There's still, I think, 4 or 5 chapters to be written. And when they go up, we'll make an announcement about them. Joey Barnes, $50. Thank you, Joey. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. Teodoro, $5. Again, thank you, Teodoro. How can there be jurisdiction with only actual laypersons and unordained men like today?
Well, I indirectly already answered that question. The point is that it always concerns the cardinals. The cardinals are electors, and the power of election really has nothing even to do with their ordination. It used to be the cardinals were not necessarily even bishops, and not necessarily even priests. It's just an elector of a. That's his main point. The whole idea of the cardinal is not his red robes or any other honor he may have. Is he a valid elector? That's in the sense that is he capable of receiving a power from the church, a transitory power to elect the pope? That's the only thing.
I think that may be the challenge for lay people, Your Excellency, is they can't parse that the cardinalate is primarily an office in the church. It does not partake of the priesthood as such.
As such, it does not. It is. Now they are pastors of parishes in Rome. So, but they in the past, I'm pretty sure they made some lay people as cardinals. I think. But in any case, they are Roman clergy.
St. Charles Borromeo, I think, 18 when he became a cardinal.
Yes. But they are the clergy of Rome. You see, the original way in which the popes were selected was by the clergy of Rome, and the cardinals are clergy of Rome. See, so you could be someone with minor orders, say, and not a priest at all, and you could be clergy of Rome. You see, then it was Saint Gregory VII who constituted the College of Cardinals, because there was interference by emperors, etc. And he said, this is the way we're going to make popes from now on. And it was simply the same thing. It was just to make the Roman clergy visible and more official, you might say, rather than just, you happen to be a priest in Rome or something. So, but the whole question is whether they're electors. That's the designated as electors.
LDP for $4.99. Thank you, LDP. Can we ever say to someone such as a homosexual that he is going to hell, or just that he is in great danger of going there?
Well, again, you have to distinguish between the inclination and the sodomitic acts. The inclination is not a sin. It is a disorder. It's a physical disorder, essentially, or emotional disorder, you might say. In any case, if he acts upon that disorder and he performs sodomitic acts, they are sins like any other. They are sins against nature. He can go to confession. He can give up his sodomitic life. He can live a good life and go to heaven. See, so it's not as if they are predestined to hell or anything like that. No, you wouldn't want to tell anybody that because it's not true, you see. And don't forget that, that's a sin against nature, but also artificial birth control is a sin against nature. And, people look upon that as, that's in the same category in the moral theology book as sodomy. See, so there are various ways in which to defy God by sinning against nature.
Crusader Filmworks 499, thank you. How can the Vatican II cardinals be legitimate electors when they were appointed by false popes?
Well, again, the same principle applies, that the material popes are able, through a supply jurisdiction, to extend the ability of the church to elect popes.
I think there might also be a disconnect here, Your Excellency, people don't realize that they're in possession of things, so they can sign away real estate, they can sell things, they are in possession of...
That wouldn't bear on it. The question is, do they have a title to receive a supply jurisdiction? And the answer is yes, just as the defrocked priest has a title to receive supply jurisdiction. So that's the whole question, whether they have that title. You see, so now lay people generally don't understand those canonical principles, but they're there. Okay. Supply jurisdiction.
Damianos von Costas, $10. Thank you, Damianos. Recently, Trump was conferred the brown scapular by a monk. Is it not the rule that only Catholics can receive the scapular, since Our Lady conferred it on a Catholic, amongst other things?
It's a general principle that non-Catholics should not wear or use Catholic sacramentals.
Now, I've heard, Your Excellency, before some converts had said that they were praying the rosary before they had become Catholic.
Yeah, well, I mean, a private use of it would not be wrong. It's just you don't. You come to the communion rail, and that's how you get enrolled in the brown scapular. That's an enrollment. You see, and by a public ceremony, you give a Catholic sacramental to a non-Catholic, because the problem is that he would appear to be Catholic even though he isn't, because he's wearing the brown scapular. So that's the reason for that.
There's someone in the chat who said that non-Catholics can receive the scapular, but I'm thinking maybe the green scapular.
The green scapular, but it's
not received. It's, I suppose, just placed in their house.
There's no enrollment in the green scapular. You put it under somebody's bed or something like that.
All right. We also are running a space on X, and Father Disposito, are there any questions there in the chat that we haven't addressed? Okay. It's ambitious to try to run both of them at the same time, but just been checking. All right. Well, one of the questions I think we had gotten by email, Your Excellency, is there a general plan of organization for the Institute in terms of, well, our next place that we're going to move into is such and such? A lot of people got excited about you pointing out Central New Jersey as a place you might be going for Mass. Do you have a similar plan for the Institute at large, as opposed to, let's say, local plans for the seminary?
Well, usually, first of all, we have to come up with the sufficient number of priests even to think about expansion. So we're always short of priests, and so that's why the seminary exists. But it takes a long time to produce a priest. Now we're going to have an ordination soon in December, and then we'll have 2 more ordained in June. So that'll help. but they are already earmarked, so to speak. Where you say Mass, in a way, happens almost by accident. The people might ask for a priest. If you see a lot of enthusiasm in a certain place, and people say, we have 20 people here that want the Mass, well, then you're attracted to that. And if they can support it and do everything that's necessary to keep it going, see, those are the factors that you have to look at. That's what would attract the clergy to say Mass in that place, because obviously it's very hard to go into a place cold. We did here. We went into Philadelphia cold, and it worked out well, but I figured it would, because it's an extremely Catholic area, Philadelphia. But other places, I remember saying Mass in Atlanta for probably a year, but that folded because of just lack of enthusiasm. Some places just don't come through, and it's in that way a bit hit and miss.
I suppose the recent case study that comes to mind for me, Your Excellency, is Australia.
Yes.
Where, we're only having Mass sporadically over a 20-year period.
Yes.
Father Eldracker goes there, pretty new as a priest still. I think it was only 2 or 3 years ordained at that point.
2.
And it was a loss for you and for the seminary, because he was very useful. And now they've picked up Father Palma as well.
Yes, Australia is a perfect case. I went there in
2017, I
think. 16, 17. I arrived in 16 and stayed until 17, 2 weeks or so. And I was very impressed with their enthusiasm. And I sensed that they would make something of it if we sent them a priest. So when I came back, I resolved we have to send them a priest. And so we sent Father Eldracker. He did a wonderful job, and they're both doing a wonderful job. You saw the gathering of the young people. That's amazing that could happen in a relatively short time.
And I think some Americans went there as well.
It was intercontinental. There were 4 continents there. The Antarctica was not represented, but there was, I forget what other one was not represented. But there were 4 continents there, yeah. And so. No, you almost have to smell it out, so to speak. What will succeed and what will not. But the missions that we do have to be supported by the people, and otherwise, there's a drain. Somebody else is supporting them.
LDP 199 thank you, LDP. Is the thesis a fact or an opinion?
I would say it's a certain theological conclusion. Opinion means this, that you adhere to one idea, but with the fear that its opposite may be true. So in that sense, it is not an opinion. It is a conclusion from certain principles which are certain, principles of faith, namely that the Catholic hierarchy and the successors of Peter, legitimate successors of Peter, must continue until the end of time. That's the Catholic faith. Somehow or other, they must continue. If that lineage dies out, the legitimate, the ability to make legitimate successors, if that dies out, then the church fails and ceases to exist. So you're dealing with some very, very big principles there.
Pretty serious.
Yes, very serious. So that lineage must continue. So you must have an explanation of how that lineage continues. And the thesis explains that. I cannot think of any other kind of explanation. Even as some say, if Christ appeared in the heavens and chose a successor, that's not in the lineage of St. Peter. See, that means the lineage has died and there's a new lineage. That is not the same church, and the authors say that.
Well, you're saying, I'm going to give a response that I often hear is, our Lord will figure it out.
Well, yes. I mean, the Holy Ghost assists the church. And yes, more in some way or other, we don't know what sort of situation we're in. We might be preparing for the end of the world. We don't know it. When our Lord said, "When I return, will there be faith on the face of the earth?" St. Paul said there's going to be a great apostasy before the end of the world. Are we in that? We don't know. We are just doing our duty. We are trying to save souls, and we are trying to explain the situation as best we can. But we have certain theological principles that cannot be compromised in those explanations.
It is your opinion that we're in the great apostasy at this time.
If we're not, I would hate to see what it is. I mean, I think it has all the characteristics of the great apostasy.
Robert Zapp, 1999. And Robert, sorry I couldn't turn on the microphone in the spaces, but the way that we're set up here, it wouldn't have allowed you to speak clearly. So your question is, how was laicization previous to Vatican II different from laicization since Vatican II?
Well, I'm not familiar with laicization since Vatican II, but they used to do this, that they would go through a ceremony where you would present your hands to the bishop and he would take pumice stone and scrape symbolically the oil off of your hands. That's how serious it was. It
was very rarely done, right?
Rarely done because, in general, priests behaved themselves before Vatican II. Did they all behave themselves? No, but in general they did. And it was all of this misbehavior is like a flood after Vatican II. But that's what they used to do. It was a very serious thing, very serious to be defrocked and laicized. But it did happen.
So would you say that obviously since Vatican II, it's become a lot more liberalized?
I really don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about what those people do. I mean, that's what Robert E. Lee called the Northern Army, those people.
That's probably the gentlest name that you could give.
Yes, I'm sure he probably had other names, but
yes.
We won't mention those.
Robert, if you have a follow-up to that, please feel free to put that in the chat. Crusader Filmworks 499, thank you again. I've heard that Cum Ex by Pope Paul IV is no longer binding, but how so if it's cited in the 1917 Code in the footnotes of Canon 188, Section 4?
It's cited as a source for one of the canons, and so there's a lot of things cited, but the
cited as precedent or
something, yes, some sort of precedent, but it was a penal law, and all of the penal laws were suppressed by the 1917 Code of Canon Law.
Is that Canon 1? Is that the first
I can't
thing?
remember what canon it is, but it's in the first page.
Right.
All the penal laws are hereby suppressed, and so they made a whole new set of penal laws. And so it was just a reference. If you see, there's an edition of canon law which has all of the references to previous laws for one reason or another.
But I think it's just a common sense thing, Your Excellency. If you're going to, for the first time in church history, put out a unified code for the whole church, you need to make sure there isn't a law hidden somewhere in the 1640s that you forgot about.
That was the whole purpose of the Code of Canon Law, because it was so complicated before, and you would have laws that would contradict each other, and et cetera, that Pius X said we have to codify it in such a way that it's very clear. Now it's in one little book.
Well, that St. Pius X, he had a few great ideas, Your Excellency.
Oh, yes, that is really the work of St. Pius X. It came out under Benedict XV.
He got the credit.
He got the credit, but it was the work of St. Pius X. He was one of the great reforming popes.
We got a
history.
catechism. We got a reformed liturgy.
Yes.
Reformed liturgical calendar.
Yes, liturgical calendar. We had Gregorian chant. He giving Holy Communion to young people.
A great gift for us.
Various other things, sacred music. The big thing is the suppression of modernism. That was his biggest contribution. But he
opened the Department of Condemnations, you could say, in that era.
Yes, that's right. He was a great condemner. Yeah, and...
So that's what a Saint Pope looks like, is what you're saying, Your Excellency.
Yes, they come once in a great while, and in those maybe 11 years of his pontificate, he did everything. Sacred Scripture. I mean, he just paid attention to the whole church, and straightened everything out. And he did those are rare people. St. Pius V did the same thing in his very short reign. St. Gregory the Seventh did the same thing in his reign. Those are your saint popes or pope saints.
And it's interesting; they have such different backgrounds. All of them. Saint Gregory the Seventh having, let's say, worked in the curial offices, and Saint Pius X having come from the trenches.
Trenches that came from the farm.
Well, I mean, I was thinking of the trenches of parish priesthood, Your Excellency, being
Yes,
out there on
that's
the
right.
front lines.
Yes.
I remember reading stories about how he had, as a bishop, mandated that catechism was to be taught on Sundays, and he came to a parish, and the priest was off having his supper, and so he starts ringing the bell. And the priest says, "Who is ringing the bell?" He comes in, and of course, it's Bishop Sarto, and
That's where you want
and
to
he
die.
and he was teaching. I think he was teaching the catechism. I think the priest still had his napkin from his meal. So
Yeah, there was another case where the priest was not hearing confessions when he should, and he came out late, and who was in the
He was hearing
confessional? It was, that's when you want the earth to open up and just swallow you. And
you've had a chance to visit his childhood home.
yes, very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Where is that?
It's in a town called Riese. It's still a small town, a relatively small town. It's in the Veneto region. I would say it's maybe about a 30-minute train ride outside of Venice. I was shown the place, this was many years ago, I think in the early 1990s, by one of his relatives, and she looked like him. too.
Really?
Yes, like a grandniece, I think it was.
Wow.
And she told us a lot of very interesting stories. And the one I really remember is the floor of the kitchen. In all the books, it said there was a dirt floor, and it was nicely tiled. And I said, "What happened? It's supposed to be a dirt floor." She said, when he became the Bishop of Mantua, he put in a tile floor in her kitchen.
A mama's boy in the best sense of
Yes,
it.
well, also when he became the Patriarch of Venice, she insisted that he come over in his magnificent choir robes and sit around the house.
Was it she who said, "You would not have your ring if I did not have mine"?
Yes, that's right. Yes, she must have been an extraordinary person, I think.
Lots of questions, I think. What is the specific theological conclusion within supplied jurisdiction which says that the College of Cardinals can elect material popes in an ongoing state of necessity?
Well, it's a general principle of supplied jurisdiction. In other words, if you have a title to receive supplied jurisdiction, you may receive it when there is a necessity. That's the general principle. So, I mean, if you're looking for a guidebook, what to do when you have a heretic pope that is imposing heresy on the whole church, you're not going to find it. Mm-hmm. We are taking these principles from other sources and applying them to the situation. So I think that's what he's asking is, what does the Blue Book say about,
the
what do
Blue
you
Book
do?
is being written at this time for such a situation.
It was not foreseen. No Catholic author or theologian ever thought that this could happen.
Does holy water bless unbelievers?
Bless. If it were used in a pious way, see, it's a sacramental, and you must use the sacramental in a pious way. So if they have no piety in the use of it, then it's worthless.
Might be referring to, there's sometimes pictures or video in Europe where they have these pride parades, and there are some priests who go around throwing holy water at the pride parade. And
Well, that's because the devil doesn't like holy water. But you have to use it with piety. That's any sacramental. So they're not magic or anything like that. You have to use them with piety in order to benefit from them. So just sprinkling heretics or something with holy water is
So Robert's follow-up to his laicization question was, the SSPX now has several laicized priests, one of which I'm familiar with, and several more by a degree of separation. The SSPX now has their own tribunal to laicize their priests. There are quite a few legacy SSPX goers that are scandalized about it.
Well, I don't know what they do or how they function. I really can't comment on that.
You turned in your membership card a few years ago, Your Excellency.
Yeah, I haven't been associated with them since 1983. So I really just, I do know though that they moved around priests that they to situations that were improper. That I know.
Unfortunately, yes.
But beyond that, I can't comment because I really don't know. I've been away from them for so long.
Yeah, his follow-up is some of them are now married and receive Holy Communion with their spouses and children at Mass in some cases.
Well, that's because SSPX assumes the power to dispense them from their priestly vows. That was extremely rare, and it was reserved to the Pope. It was if you were defrocked, you still.
All those cases were reserved to the Holy See?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, those are reserved to the Holy See. So they are assuming a power they don't have. If they're doing that, I don't know that. I'm just taking his word for it. I don't know if they're doing that. But no, you can't do it. You couldn't. If you were a subdeacon, you couldn't be dispensed except by the Roman Pontiff. You took a vow, the law of chastity applied to you, the canon law of chastity. You couldn't just say, "Oh, I don't want to be a subdeacon anymore. I want to go out and get married." You're finished.
I know
You're
you
done.
said you crossed the bridge blew up behind you.
Yes, that's it. And if you, for any reason, were dispensed, you would have to say the breviary for the rest of your life, even in married life. Yes.
Jimmy, another £10. Thank you, Jimmy. I have a family member coming from the Novus Ordo who hasn't been to confession for many years. What advice can I give them?
Well, they should go to confession. They should make a very thorough examination of conscience. They, I think, should speak to a priest and make a good confession. I mean,
I suppose it might be hard for a lay person to exhort another lay person to confession, Your Excellency. It feels somewhat priestly in that way that a priest needs to help you with that.
I don't think that's out of place. I mean, if someone has been away for a long time, I think it would be a good fraternal charity to say, you need to confess to a real priest and make a good examination of conscience. And it might take a long time and make a general confession even or a whole life. It's that's not out of place.
Well, we've got about 15 minutes left in the stream, so if you have had a question that you wanted to ask but you were waiting for some of these other conversations to play out, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, we will be wrapping up. It's been the first few days back of the academic year, Your Excellency, so I know you have plenty to do after this.
It's very busy. As I always say, it's like getting an old car going again every year, a clunker that doesn't want to turn over. Or
there was a picture on social media of you teaching first year Latin, and someone had said, well, it looks like French with what's being written on the board. And I thought, well, you don't just first year Latin, you don't just dive in right away. You probably have to make some connections to, when you
I also teach French in the same classroom, so maybe there was something on the
board that was left
French.
over.
Yes, yeah, that's possible. Yes.
And that you had someone had said, is there a preference for towels instead of erasers?
I just use whatever works. I mean, I as I always say, I just work here, and whatever the management, so to speak, puts in front of me, I use. And so no, I don't know. If, maybe we don't have enough erasers or something.
Well, I do. Yeah, that's a different question. A follow up is an Eastern Rite Catholic priest or a Novus Ordo priest ordained before 1968 an acceptable option for confession?
That's. Father Cicada and I went back and forth on that.
Have you said that you're undecided on this question?
Yeah, I remember having long discussions with Father. Father Cicada thought yes, and
you tend to err.
I'm not sure. I'm just not sure.
I think the IMBC position is absolutely not except in danger of death.
Yeah, I never resolved it in my own mind. Yeah.
And someone might ask, well, why haven't you resolved it? Your Excellency, you've had lots of time to think about it.
It hasn't come up, actually. It's, I mean, it is a non-Catholic religion. It's not a different church, but it's a different religion. These are ministers of a non-Catholic religion. that would say you should not go near them except in danger of death. So, and what is their title of jurisdiction to forgive sins if they are ministers of a non-Catholic religion? That's my objection to it. But as I said, we had Father Chicout and I went back.
This is before we had tape recorders and video to
yes.
capture some of those conversations.
Yes, I never resolved it in my mind, but I would say that's a very strong argument right there, that just to stay away from it.
And potentially one of our clergy could hear your confession if you could make it out to one of the locations, or if the person is asking.
Yes.
Leo for $5. Thank you, Leo. Hello, Your Excellency. What can someone do to exorcise a house if no traditional priests are available to help in exorcising a house?
Well, you could use holy water in all of your rooms. That's what the priest is going to do. But you need a priest to bless your house, and exorcise is a whole other thing. You would have to have evidence of the presence of the devil in the house, which is very rare, and I don't think most priests would do that unless you had very strong signs. But you could have your house blessed by a priest, but I don't know where you live, but there must be a priest that comes around sometime.
Sure.
Father Bear is going to Hawaii and after Christmas, and for the Australian priests go to Singapore and to Vietnam and Japan. So
it might be in the neighborhood, Leo. So if you want to use the contact us form on rcinstitute.org, you can see if potentially one of the institute clergy is available to help you. Joseph Barden, $50. Thank you, Joseph. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. Teodoro Boggio, $2. What do you think of the CMRI currently and work with? ? I think he's asking, do you work with the CMRI? And what do you think of them?
Well, we differ on a number of subjects. They are very strong on totalism. In other words, they would say they are against the thesis very much. And so we would disagree on that. We disagree on marriage annulments. They assume they in cases where people are having a difficult time, they do investigations, and then they come together and have a discussion, and then they say, in our judgment, you have a reason to consider yourself not married. That's what I understand about.
And you don't do anything like that.
No, we say that is the usurpation of the church's power to rule, and we cannot do that. So we differ on that. We differ on liturgical things. They use the Holy Week of 1955. We do not. They use the 1958 rubrics. We do not. And the reason we do not is because they were all designed by Hannibal Bugnini. You have to get that pronounced correct. Bugnini, they do because they were promulgated by Pius XII, and that's a legitimate, certainly, argument. I mean, I wouldn't argue with that. It's just that we say if you're going to protect tradition, if you're going to uphold tradition, in the hindsight that we have now of what went on in the 50s, and how that was actually meant to proceed toward the new Mass, all of those things, it makes sense to go back to pre-55. So we would differ on that. But I mean, it's a legitimate argument to say Pius XII promulgated this so we can use it. Or they would even say we should use it. I would not argue with that. I mean, I think
they would say even use stronger language than that.
Yes, but so, I mean, we differ on those things. But we don't. Our paths do not cross in the apostolate. It's so they have their apostolate, we have ours.
A quick question: when does the bishop think he will retire? I enjoy watching his lecture series.
Well, in the old days, bishops, no clergy ever retired. That's a Novus Ordo thing. Retirement.
Die with your boots on.
You pass out at the altar, all right, or you drop dead in the classroom. And so I have no intention to retire, but you did slow down, and some days I feel I should be slowing down. I'm 74 and a half, but I'll just go until I drop.
Well, I'd multos annos for now, Your Excellency. Jimmy Hun, 10 pounds again. Jimmy, thank you for your generosity throughout the stream and for the seminary stream from last week. Is it possible to find breviaries without the Bea Psalter from 1945 onward? Seemingly every set I have seen appears to contain it.
It's very difficult. There were some produced in that period. After John the 23rd, you see more, but he reformed the breviary into, he cut it down a great deal. John the 23rd didn't like the Bea Psalter. Nobody liked the Bea Psalter. Nobody did. And so, as a matter of fact, Pius XII was hurt that his Psalter was not popular. And it's just very difficult. I mean, there were some editions. I've seen them. I have them in that period of 45 to John the 20th, 58, say, or 62, in that period, which were the traditional Psalter. But if you're looking for a four-volume set in decent condition, you're looking at least $1,000.
I would say some of the sets you're looking for in Bishop Sanborn's safe, I think, but in part because he knows he's planning for the breviary apocalypse, as you've said, that will happen next 10
we
years.
have to eventually reproduce the breviary. We have to. But that's going to be a very expensive undertaking. And
$250,000 minimum.
Oh, easy. Yes. I mean, it's just, and like a nightmare, as far as getting it all correct.
Right. I think that would be a bare bones edition as well, not something that,
Well, $250,000, I think it would do a pretty good job. But you would have a limited, so if you did maybe 500 copies, that would be a lot. You see, so each one would cost a great deal of money. It's so we haven't even looked at it. I mean, that figure could be way off, but it's just it's going to be difficult and expensive. But we might have to do it.
Project number 77 to add to the pile.
Yes, somebody would have to be locked in a room and food sent in, and you reproduce this breviary.
Slid in a tray underneath the virtual prison.
Yes, and like Ben-Hur, you can tell they're still alive because the food disappears.
Well, weren't they locked to the oars in Ben-Hur?
Yeah,
this
so
person would be locked to their desk too.
See, his mother and his sister were imprisoned by the evil Roman, and so he wanted to get them out after he came back from the winning the race. He wanted to know where his mother and sister were. So the Roman general, or whatever, I can't remember his name, Messala, he sent somebody down to see in the prison, and they said, well, you can tell they're still alive because the food is gone. So, but then they were discovered to be lepers. And I always say that scene, because the Roman soldier says, the look on his face, and he has the torch, and he says, lepers. They had all British accents. All the Romans had British accents. And so I always say that's the same thing as Sata Vacantis, like looking and finding Sata Vacantis. Oh, there they are. It's terrible.
Got all the spots on our faces.
Yes, terrible. Yes.
I suppose a final follow-up to that CMRI question. Can someone from the CMRI receive sacraments from Institute clergy?
Yes.
Is it not true that every religion, as every lifestyle, leads all to God, since all must be judged by God?
Is it not true that all religions lead to God? It is false that all religions lead to God.
And why is that false, Your Excellency?
Because there is only one Savior, our Lord Jesus Christ, and he founded only one church, and that is his church. He is the head of that church. There are no other churches besides the true church. There's only one church. There are groups of heretics and groups of schismatics. There are groups of pagans and so forth, but they are not in any way constituted as a path to salvation. There is one road. There is one road built to salvation, and that is the Catholic road. If you don't take that road, you're not going to arrive.
Yeah, and it's a pretty narrow and hard road, Your Excellency. I mean, if it doesn't matter which road you take, I mean, Catholicism is a pretty hard religion. You know,
It is. It's hard. It's difficult to observe. There's many rules, many moral. It gets right down into the depths of your mind. Your mind has to be pure as well as your body and everything else. And no, it's has the highest code of morals of all religions in the world. But there is you cannot detach Christ from salvation, and you cannot detach Christ from His church. So there is one church, one religion. Everything else outside of it is diaspora. In other words, it's all false.
and our Lord's pretty clear about that in Scripture.
Absolutely, absolutely, and there are many quotes of popes, etc., and and condemnations of that very thing that what's his name, Bergoglio said. I can't.
The creature.
Yes, the explicit condemnations of that.
Mm. Does His Excellency recommend any post-conciliar publications which are Novus Ordo but have quality content?
Those two things are incompatible.
Mutually exclusive
Yes.
conditions.
Yes. If we find something in the library that is after 1960 or something, we just throw it in the garbage.
Well, and His Excellency has said to me over many times that in general, to be very worried, concerned about an imprimatur after 1950, that before 1950 you're guaranteed safety, but after 1950 you need to check with a priest about it.
Yeah,
generally.
there were various authors that were trending toward modernism at that time, and some others were very good. You see, but you have a mix at that time.
Hmm. All right. Well, we've come to the end of our stream. Thank you for everyone who's participated, who donated, who asked questions. As always, if you'd like to learn more about the Institute, you can find that at rcinstitute.org. You can also learn more about the thesis at thethesis.us. There are articles still to be added to that site, but there's still plenty of articles to read in the meantime if you'd like to learn more about that. If you have questions that didn't make it onto this stream, they could potentially be asked in the next quarterly stream, which will happen at the end of the fourth quarter. You can send those questions in the meantime to the Contact Us form on RomanCatholicInstitute.org. If you're watching this after the stream has finished, obviously, and you're watching it on your own time, you can still participate by sending a super thanks or clicking on the donate button, which Father Disposito has put in the description. There's also, I think, a special on the RomanCatholicMedia.org store on any merchandise. So I'll put that code in the chat. That's, I think, SEP2025. So 25% off any purchase of $20 or more. There's all sorts of merchandise in there, mass cards for people who, if you have masses said for the living or the dead, you can send them a mass card. There's also mugs and notebooks and other things like that, which will all go towards supporting the Institute's work. As always, Your Excellency, thank you for your time.
Thank you.